Welcome to another deep dive. We're going global today. We're exploring the challenges faced by Indigenous communities in 1989. And to really get into it, we'll be using the IWGIA yearbook from that year.
That's right. It's an amazing resource.
It is. Let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
So this yearbook, it paints a picture of a year of kind of two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, you see this rise in global unity among Indigenous movements.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side,
Right.
you see all these intense struggles,
Oh, yeah.
even genocide.
Exactly. And what's striking is the lack of response from governments and international bodies, like the UN.
Yeah, right.
It really highlights the need for continued advocacy.
It does. So let's dive into some specific regions, starting in North America. The yearbook details this Inuit circumpolar conference happening in Greenland,
Right.
which I think really points to a growing sense of solidarity
Yeah.
among those groups in the Arctic.
Yeah. Definitely.
But further south, in Alberta, Canada, the Lubicon Nation was engaged in a different kind of fight. They were dealing with environmental damage caused by
Right.
oil companies operating on their land,
I remember reading about that.
which was directly impacting their ability to hunt and fish, their way of life.
Really impacting their ability to live, even
Absolutely. It was their livelihood.
their livelihood. Exactly.
But get this. The Lubicon Nation actually succeeded in forcing those oil companies to halt operations.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. It's a testament to their strength and resilience. And I know you're passionate about environmental activism and corporate accountability.
Oh, absolutely.
This case really shows the power of Indigenous communities to hold corporations accountable for environmental damage.
It really does.
It makes you think about the true cost of resource extraction
It does.
and who pays the price for it.
Exactly. Who bears that burden?
And the fight for environmental justice isn't limited to just corporate accountability. The yearbook also highlights the struggle of the Innu people in Labrador, Canada.
Okay.
They were fighting against these low-altitude NATO flights,
Oh, yeah.
which were not only super disruptive to their communities, but were also causing health problems
Yeah.
and environmental damage.
All in violation of UN human rights standards, too. huh?
Exactly. It raises this really important question.
What's that?
How do we balance national security interests with the rights of Indigenous communities?
I don't know. It's tough.
It's a tough one.
It is.
But it's a conversation we need to have.
Definitely.
Now, the yearbook also touches on the relationship between the U.S. government and Native American tribes.
Okay.
And one example that stuck out to me was the conflict surrounding casino operations on the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation.
Oh, right. I remember that.
It really highlights this struggle for sovereignty and
Yeah.
self-determination that's ongoing. There's also mention of this debate surrounding the Federal Death Penalty Act of 1989
Okay.
and concerns about its potential to disproportionately impact Native Americans.
Wow.
So just a few examples of the ongoing challenges
Yeah, definitely.
faced by Native American tribes in their pursuit of justice and self-determination.
And it makes you wonder
What's that?
what progress has been made
Yeah.
and what still needs to be done.
Yeah. It's a complex history.
It is. It is.
And it's still unfolding today.
Exactly.
Let's move on to South America.
Mm.
The yearbook paints this concerning picture of the Yanomami people in Brazil. They were facing a huge uphill battle against gold miners
Oh, yeah.
who were encroaching on their land.
I read about them.
It's a story of violence and disease.
And devastation.
Devastation, exactly. And the Brazilian Congress actually ordered these miners to be removed,
They did.
but not much action was taken.
That's so frustrating.
It is.
It really shows you how vulnerable these communities are.
It does, even when there are legal protections in place.
Exactly. It's like they're not always enough.
Right. Now, there's this Yanomami leader, Davi Yanomami.
Oh, yeah.
He gained international recognition for his efforts to protect the environment.
He did.
The yearbook mentions he received the Global 500 Prize from the UN
Wow.
and the Right Livelihood Award.
That's amazing.
Incredible, right? But here's the thing.
Okay.
Even with all this global attention,
Yeah.
protests were still happening in Brasilia,
Wow.
demanding more protection for the Yanomami.
So it wasn't enough.
It just shows that raising awareness is only one part of the equation.
Yeah.
Real change requires action
Right.
from governments.
Right.
And sadly, the Yanomami are not alone in this fight. The yearbook also documents the struggles of the Chamain people in Bolivia,
Oh, right.
who are fighting to protect their land from colonists,
They are. I remember reading about them.
seeking to exploit their resources.
Yeah. It's a common story, unfortunately.
It is. They organized a peaceful march in the Department of Bendi to try and get the government's attention.
To demand action.
Yeah, and they're not giving up.
Good for them.
They're determined to protect their ancestral lands.
And they should be.
They should. Now, before we move on from South America,
Okay.
I want to highlight one more story that I found particularly impactful. It focuses on a land titling project in Peru
Okay.
that aimed to help the Ashaninka people who were basically being exploited as laborers on farms.
Wow.
AIDSEP, the Interethnic Association for the Development of the Peruvian Rainforest, played a key role in this project,
That's great.
advocating for their right to land and freedom.
It's a powerful example of how social justice
It is.
and indigenous rights intersect.
Exactly. It's a reminder that securing land rights is crucial,
It is.
but it's only one part of the puzzle.
Right.
The fight for indigenous rights is multifaceted. It encompasses environmental protection, social justice, and economic equity.
Absolutely. It's about addressing these systemic inequalities and empowering indigenous communities to shape their own futures.
You're exactly right.
It's about holistic change.
It is.
And it's not just confined to the Americas, the fight for indigenous rights. The IWGIA yearbook. It also covers some pretty remarkable developments in Europe and North Asia. For example, in 1989, Norway saw the establishment of the first Sami parliament.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It marked a significant step towards self-governance
Right.
for the Sami people.
So this Sami parliament, as described in the yearbook, it basically serves as this advisory body on issues that impact the Sami.
Exactly.
And while it may not have full decision-making power just yet, it's still
It's a step.
a huge step.
It is. It's a step towards greater autonomy.
Right. And it makes you think about how different countries are approaching these issues.
Yeah.
Indigenous rights and
Right.
self-determination.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all
Definitely not.
solution.
No.
Now, shifting gears a little bit to the vast expanse of the Soviet North.
Right.
The yearbook reveals that indigenous communities there were grappling with all these challenges related to industrial expansion
Of course.
and its impact on their environment
Yeah. That makes sense.
and traditional ways of life.
Absolutely.
And we see this really vividly in the successful protests
Oh, wow.
against the Turakhansk hydroelectric dam
Yeah.
and also the planned exploitation of gas deposits on the Yamal Peninsula.
Wow. Those are some major victories.
They are.
Yeah.
These protests were driven by concerns over the potential destruction of sacred sites, the disruption of reindeer herding, and this overall threat to the ecological balance of the region.
And they won.
They did.
Wow. The yearbook also talks about this Nenets writer,
Okay.
Stasija Lefsuj.
Okay.
And she used radio broadcasts
Oh, wow.
to advocate for her people's rights.
So smart.
It's a really powerful story.
It is. It shows how media and storytelling can really help amplify indigenous voices.
Totally.
It's so important
Yeah.
to give them a platform.
Yeah. And it's not just individual stories either. The yearbook also points to this emergence of indigenous associations, like Yamal for Posterity, and this movement to form an umbrella organization
Oh, wow.
called Small Peoples of the North.
So it sounds like there was this growing sense of collective identity
Definitely.
and political organization.
Yes.
It's inspiring to see how they were come together in the face of these shared challenges.
Absolutely. Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Now let's shift our focus to the Asia-Pacific region,
Okay.
the IWGIA yearbook. It unveils a complex tapestry
Oh, yeah.
of struggles and resilience
It does.
across this vast and diverse area.
So one recurring theme we see throughout the Pacific Islands is the impact of militarization and nuclear testing by foreign powers,
It's a huge issue.
especially the U.S.-led PACE-X 89 war game.
Oh, right. I remember reading about that.
This massive military exercise really raised concerns
Yeah.
among Pacific Islanders about their political independence and safety.
Of course.
It's like they were caught in the crossfire of these global power struggles without having a say.
Without any say.
And speaking of standing up to powerful forces, the yearbook highlights this case of Palau, or Palau as we know it today.
Right.
They were negotiating the Compact of Free Association with the U.S.
I see.
And they fought really hard to protect their constitution.
Wow, that's incredible.
It really is. This
Yeah.
tiny island nation standing its ground against this superpower,
Yeah. So inspiring.
determined to maintain control over their own future.
Exactly. But the Pacific region was also dealing with another big issue at the time. Japanese and Taiwanese drift net fishing.
Right.
The yearbook. It describes how Pacific nations were pushing for a UN resolution to ban these practices.
And why was that?
Well, drift net fishing was causing extensive damage to marine ecosystems.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, this push for a resolution,
Yeah.
it faced significant resistance, particularly from Japan.
It's a reminder that environmental justice is
Yeah.
deeply intertwined with indigenous rights.
It is, absolutely.
And advocating for one often means advocating for the other.
It does. Now, let's move on to Southeast Asia.
Okay.
The IWGIA yearbook uncovers a region grappling with a multitude of challenges,
Okay.
ongoing conflicts,
Yeah.
displacement of indigenous communities,
Right.
and human rights abuses.
So the situation in East Timor,
Oh, yeah.
which was under Indonesian occupation at the time, was particularly alarming.
US.
Indonesia had implemented this open province policy,
Yeah. I remember reading about that.
but it seems like it didn't really have much of an impact.
No, it doesn't.
Fear of reprisal was widespread,
Mm.
preventing people from speaking openly about the situation.
Right. It's a reminder of how important international pressure and independent monitoring
It is.
are in these situations.
They're so important
They are.
to ensure basic human rights are being upheld.
Exactly. The Indonesian transmigration program in West Papua was another concerning development,
Oh, right.
highlighted in the yearbook.
And this program was aimed at relocating people
Rice.
from more densely populated parts of Indonesia
Yeah.
to less populated regions.
Okay.
But it resulted in the displacement of indigenous communities like the Doni people.
Yeah.
They were forced into unfamiliar lowland areas
Right.
and faced a whole host of new challenges.
Right. Including limited access to health care,
Wow.
which led to higher mortality rates.
That's awful.
It is. It's a stark reminder of how development projects
Yeah.
can have these unintended
Right.
negative consequences,
Especially for indigenous populations.
especially for them.
And then there's the story of the Penan people in Sarawak, Malaysia,
Oh, yes.
who were fighting to protect their rainforest homeland from logging companies.
Oh, yeah. I remember them.
They used a variety of tactics,
Like what?
setting up blockades to physically stop the logging.
That's brave.
It is.
It is.
And they also launched legal challenges
Oh, wow.
against the forest ordinance.
Were.
So they were fighting on multiple fronts.
They were. It's incredible.
Really impressive.
It is.
The yearbook also mentions a potential ban on log exports from Sarawak and Sabah,
Oh, really?
which would have been huge.
That would have been a game changer.
It would have,
It would have.
for the logging industry
Right.
and for the indigenous communities fighting to protect their forests.
It's a reminder that finding sustainable solutions
Yeah,
often requires these really tough choices.
it does.
You know, balancing economic interests
Right.
with environmental protection.
It's a complex issue.
It is. It is. Okay, so turning our attention to South Asia now,
Okay.
the IWGIA yearbook. It shines a spotlight on a particularly dire situation. The Juma people
Okay.
of the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Bangladesh.
Okay.
They were facing systematic violence
Oh, no.
and displacement
That's terrible.
at the hands of the Bangladeshi army and Bengali settlers.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
It is. There were reports of murder, rape, torture,
Oh, my gosh.
and forced displacement. I mean, it was really bad.
wow.
It was really bad. And because the situation was so alarming, IWGIA,
Yeah.
they actually formed an independent international commission
Wow.
to investigate these atrocities.
It's incredible that they took that step
It is.
to bring attention to this
It is.
and seek accountability.
It is. And it just goes to show you
What's that?
that the fight for indigenous rights is far from over.
You're right.
You know, even in the late 20th century,
Yeah,
these communities were still facing
Yeah.
existential threats
they were.
and these just horrific human rights violations.
It's a sobering reminder that
Yeah.
ongoing vigilance,
Yes.
advocacy
Yeah.
are essential to ensure these communities are treated with dignity and respect,
Absolutely.
and their rights are upheld.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder, too, that these situations are never simple.
Yeah,
You know, achieving lasting peace and justice.
right.
It takes a lot.
It does.
Navigating those complex political landscapes,
Absolutely.
addressing internal divisions,
Yeah.
as well as the external challenges.
You're right. So looking back on our journey through the IWGIA yearbook,
Yeah.
it's been quite a deep dive
As
into the challenges faced by indigenous communities in 1989.
It has been.
It was a year of both progress and setbacks.
It was.
A growing global indigenous movement,
Yeah.
but also these persistent struggles
Yeah.
against oppression and injustice.
It's incredible, though, isn't it?
What is?
The resilience of these communities
It really is.
worldwide. Despite facing all this pressure,
Yeah.
often from really powerful forces,
Right.
they're still resisting,
They are.
organizing,
Yeah.
advocating for their rights,
Absolutely.
the protection of their lands and cultures.
The yearbook is filled with examples of their creativity in using all these different strategies
Yeah.
to fight back.
Yeah. It's inspiring.
It is. It makes you think, though.
About what?
How can individuals, those of us who aren't part of indigenous communities,
Right.
how can we contribute to positive change?
That's the question.
How can we support indigenous rights?
On a global scale.
Yeah.
On a global scale.
Well, I think it starts with education.
Okay.
We need to learn more,
Right.
deepen our understanding of the historical and contemporary contexts of these struggles.
And
Then we can become more informed
Right.
and effective advocates. We can support indigenous-led organizations,
Okay.
amplify their voices, advocate for policy changes
All right.
that uphold their rights.
So it's about being active and engaged
It is.
in this fight.
It is. We can also be conscious consumers,
Oh,
choosing to support businesses that operate ethically,
yeah.
and respect indigenous rights.
And I think most importantly,
Yeah.
we need to engage in open and respectful dialogue,
You're right.
listening to and learning from indigenous voices,
Absolutely.
and working together
Yeah.
to build a more just and equitable world for all.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
I do too.
This deep dive into the IWGIA yearbook has been eye-opening.
It really has.
I encourage everyone listening to explore their resources further.
Yeah. They have a wealth of information
They do.
about the experiences of indigenous peoples around the world.
It's a journey of learning
It is.
and understanding.
It is, and I think it's an essential one
Yeah.
for building a better future.
I couldn't agree more.